Lyle Shelton first joined the Australian Christian Lobby in 2007, and in 2013, he became the managing director. He's just stepped down from that role and announced his joining of the Australian Conservatives and Corey Bernardi, and he's moved to Queensland and now moving on to a next stage in fighting the culture war, one where he's actually getting into party politics as opposed to working from the outside as a lobbyist. In just a moment, I'm going to join Lyle and we're going to talk about exactly what happened in the last 5 years that were great memories and maybe not so great, and what he's looking forward to, and what battles we have to prepare for in the coming days of the culture war in Australia.
Warning, you are now entering a diversity zone where different opinions are tolerated. This is not a safe space. This is Pellowe Talk.
Lyle, thanks for joining me on Pellowe Talk today. It's an honour to have you on the show again so soon, and not soon enough at the same time. And last time we spoke, you knew, but the rest of us had no idea about the big move that was coming. So first of all, congratulations on a great 10 years worth of frontline work for the culture war.
Thanks very much, Dave. I'm very grateful to have been part of an amazing team of people at the Australian Christian Lobby, and with so many supporters right around the country. And it was a privilege to serve in that organisation. But as you said in your intro, I feel it's time for a change. I'm delighted that Martin Iles has agreed to take over and that the board has approved that. I think he's an outstanding, talented young man, and he'll take ACL to new heights. But for me, I feel drawn to the partisan side of the culture war, if you like, to use your term, to get engaged in party politics and to see if we can encourage people to join a political movement that we believe can make a difference in our parliaments, particularly starting with trying to get senators elected right around the country to hold the balance of power in the Senate after the next election.
That actually appeals to me quite a lot. I've resisted all the arguments, so I'm unpersuaded by all the arguments that I've heard the experts, the elite commentators and players, such as the Prime Minister and the former Attorney General, make about reforming the Senate. I think what they describe as chaos in there is, it's not a perfect system, and anybody looking for a perfect system and fiddling with it and tweaking it until it is perfect is chasing a fool's errand, a mirage that they'll never arrive at. It is meant to be a house of review, a check and balance. And I think the worst possible thing for democracy is the possibility that a single party could dominate both the lower house and the upper house and do whatever they wanted. It's all right when the person you agree with has that power, but it's pretty bad for the nation if the wrong agenda and the wrong motives get in there. And to my mind, that's exactly why the system was designed with that check, so that it made it hard to make laws. It shouldn't be easy to increase the legislation that governs us ad infinitum.
No, that's exactly right. It suits the major parties for them to control both the lower and the upper house. And for most of my life, that's been the way it's been. One of the parties has held government. They've been able to get their legislation through both houses. But in recent years, we've seen a fragmentation of the vote, particularly in the upper house, in the Senate. And I think that reflects a discontent in the Australian population. They haven't been happy with the two-party system. They haven't been happy with politics as usual, and they're wanting the system shaken up. Now, that's resulted in a level of chaos, as you said, but at Australian Conservatives, we are looking to be a constructive alternative, to be able to be a genuine conservative voice that unites the conservative vote in Australia and that can influence particularly coalition governments to make sure they stick to conservative values. And at the moment, they're drifting very badly to what I call the green rainbow left. And we've seen this on social policy with so much of the Liberal and the National Party, their senior members voting to redefine marriage, voting not to support basic things like freedom of speech and freedom of religion. And so I think now more than ever, we need a conservative, common sense voice in the Senate. I'd rather have the Australian Conservatives and the Greens on the extreme left, or parties of protest on the extreme right. We want to be a constructive conservative voice that can point to a better way and to hopefully keep coalition governments honest into the future.
Yeah, when I say chaos, it's only quoting what I would call propaganda from those people whose purposes it serves to describe it that way. I don't agree. I think there should be that tension there. I think it should be a quagmire. I think it should be hard to negotiate. I think there should be compromise involved, because nobody has all the truth, and to pretend one party has got it all right. Look, I think work choices went too far. I love John Howard. His government was amazing. He made some really dumb moves. But, work choices was just taking that power that he had a little bit too far. And we see the same thing in Queensland, that without an upper house, you just have one government come in and do whatever they want. And then the next government comes in and they undo everything that the previous government did. And there might as well not be a government, because it's like 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. We're never actually getting anywhere. But I also think that crazy parties such as the Palmer United experiment are self-correcting experiments that the system is designed to remedy. They don't get in power for 50 years. They get in power for one election cycle, and during that cycle, they get to demonstrate the stuff they're made of.
We are very much of the view that the Senate should fulfil the role that the founding fathers meant for it. And by having some smaller parties, some independents, hopefully having a strong Australian Conservatives presence in there, we can help play that role and ensure that it is a house of review, and particularly becomes a place where conservative values can be given voice and influence public policy and the legislative process. It still means that you do get a say, though, and it's really important that all of us take our vote very seriously. And the Senate in particular is going to be very, very important at the next election. I mean, the task for us here in Queensland is to unseat Pauline Hanson. Now, Pauline Hanson, or it won't be her specifically, it'll be one of her candidates, but her party has harnessed legitimate areas of concern that many people are worried about. She's given voice to that. But where I think the difference with Australian Conservatives is we can be a constructive voice, a constructive minor party. We're not here to wreck the coalition government. We will support coalition candidates. Probably 9 times out of 10, there'd obviously be some we probably wouldn't preference, a Christopher Pyne, for instance, or a George Brandis. But George is gone now. But those type of candidates that the LNP constantly throw up. But we're not here to wreck a coalition government, but we are here to, I guess, be a counterbalance and to stop the mission drift that's been going on in conservative politics for so long, and to bring them back to the true north. I think Australians are looking for a common sense alternative, and we do offer a better way for those who are looking for that.
Yeah, excellent. Look, let's reflect for a couple of minutes on the. I'm enjoying the partisan opinion kind of discussions, and I'm sure you're enjoying being off the leash a little bit as well. But tell me about, especially the last 5 years that you were managing director of the Australian Christian Lobby. There was certainly one issue that seemed to dominate, I guess, the last 13 or 14 years since the definition of marriage was confirmed in 2004, and since then multiple failed attempts to undefine it went by, but it seemed to dominate the last 5 years. I think most people are fairly familiar with that particular issue. I could certainly sense in I guess your after the result, a little bit of exhaustion might be right, but a little bit of tiredness, I guess, in your tone and in your posture, and a shared frustration that people on the side of truth and reality and the eternal definition of marriage didn't actually get off the sidelines and get engaged more or sooner.
Look, there's no doubt that issue, it's been dominating the political landscape for more than a decade, as you say. And ACL was one of the few organisations that chose to take that on. We fought that issue every step of the way, and I have no regrets about that. I think it's helped awaken the people in Australia. It's helped awaken Christians. It's awakened conservatives to the consequences of the change. No doubt about it. And yes, towards the end of what was a very long campaign last year, there was a lot of tiredness, not just myself, but the whole team who were engaged in this. We really gave it our all. And it was very disappointing to see, as I've said to you before, right at the end, after the plebiscite had passed and the legislation was going through Parliament, that conservative politicians, Liberal National Party politicians, and as a government, did not, either could not or were unwilling to protect freedom of speech, protect the right of Christian schools to teach children in Christian schools that marriage is between a man and a woman. We just lost so many freedoms in one fell swoop as a result of the careless enactment of that. We were told there would be no consequences, and now, of course, we're dealing with the consequences, as you and I have spoken of before. So that was very wearying, but it also harnessed my resolve that I needed to get engaged in a partisan way here, that it was politicians who were letting us down, and that the presence of a party like Australian Conservatives, which isn't going to compromise on principles of freedom of speech and civil society and free debate, all of these things which the totalitarian rainbow left were using gay marriage as a Trojan horse to push more sinister anti-free speech agendas. We're the only party that is willing to stand up against that as a party. There are significant individuals and the Liberals and the Nats who did, but as a government, they were unable to do that. And that was a big shock. And that should shock all Australians who believe in freedom of speech and freedom of religion.
Yeah, I was chatting with a denomination leader earlier this morning, and we were talking about you and the move to AC. And we remarked that Corey and the Australian Conservatives really have staked a flag in the ground in bringing you on in such a prominent role, in saying, you know, we have absolute affiliation, absolute harmony on these critical traditional Australian values that Lyle has championed so visibly and even from the front for the last 5 years. And we're happy for our brand to be associated with those values. And this is a courage of conviction that has sorely been missing in the major parties, where they're not wanting to alienate the centre, and so they actually abandon their grassroots, the people who actually have very, very firm convictions, and they try and compromise and please everybody and end up losing elections because they're trying to please everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, sadly, the Liberal and the National parties have been unable to have clear positions on these basic freedoms. They've on the issue of marriage, on the life issues around abortion, euthanasia. They
freedom of speech,
conscience votes. Freedom of speech, as we've been discussing. Now, these are basic, fundamental conservative ideals, and they're values that have been Australian values up until recent decades. And to see that there's no representation for these values in the mainstream political parties, apart from outstanding individuals. I have to give credit where credit's due. There are individuals, but as a party, the pressure is on these individuals to go quiet on these important issues. So Australian Conservatives are not ashamed of these values and virtues. I'm very pleased to bring whatever campaigning experience that I have in these areas. I'm also keen to be engaged in a whole range of other issues that I think are really important, like our unsustainable debt, which is really intergenerational theft, $530 billion of debt, which we have very little hope of paying off in my lifetime, and it looks like our children are going to have to deal with that. Now, we've had a Conservative government in power for the last few years, and yet we've been able, that the debt has blossomed instead of going the other way. So there's a whole range of issues that we as Conservatives think are important, which are not being given a voice that they should be given through what were once traditional Conservative political parties.
Overnight mayhem on campus.
Death to whiteys! Death to whiteys!
Almost instantly, violence broke out.
They're so threatened by the idea that a conservative speaker might be persuasive and interesting and funny and might persuade, might take some people with him. They just have to shut it down at all costs.
I am a nasty woman.
I am non-binary, and that means I identify as something other than male or female.
There were 3 injections in January, and nothing else, only a little bit sun, and now I'm really down.
It's what you feel that defines you.
And I can feel in myself that I'm changing to a black woman.
I don't think parents should have much of a say in education, I really don't.
My family says to me, you have to wait until the whole family is together to make a decision about your transition and things like that. And it's like, no, I don't. This is my life, and this is something I have to do.
There are certain things we want students to know.
Meeting a person and being able to say, you're really nice to me and I like you. That's what being bisexual means to me.
Inculcation, if you like, in the way society works.
What other issues in the past 5 years were the Australian Christian lobby working on while the spectre of undefining marriage seemed to eclipse all else?
Yeah, look, that issue was obviously a very prominent issue, but every day that I'd go to work at ACL with the team, we'd be working on issues like euthanasia. We've fought a number of euthanasia bills, and sadly, that was another issue we lost in Victoria towards the end of last year. Over the last 10 years, we've been winning those debates. And this is symptomatic of the further drift to the left, to emotivism becoming the new logic, it's the same people who push things like redefining marriage. They're behind the push for euthanasia. They're behind the push for abortion. It's that same sort of worldview. And so we've been fighting those issues as well, not as visible, but just as hard. We've managed to stop decriminalisation of abortion, not just ACL, but in coalition with others, of course, in Queensland and New South Wales in particular. We've been involved in the Charter of Rights debate to stop judges getting extra power to effectively legislate from the bench. That was a very big
Brilliant.
campaign I was involved in with my predecessor, Jim
That's
Wallace.
so important.
Yeah, and we've advocated for persecuted Christians overseas and trying to elevate their status. So there's been a whole range of issues that we've been engaged in. And of course, at election times, we've run Meet Your Candidate forums, we've put out candidate information, all aimed at trying to encourage Christians to cast an informed vote at the election in a non-partisan way. We want people to contrast the policy. So a lot of hard work has gone on constantly at ACL. And it's been a real privilege and a joy to be part of that work, but I'm looking forward to applying some of those skills now in a more pointed, partisan way, having joined an actual political party.
Talk to me about the debate. It might have been a debate in your head, but it's certainly a debate amongst conservative Christians on what is the best strategy. Do we join the major party and help redeem it, restore it back to the strong engine that it used to be of traditional Australian values, or do we give up and start afresh, a bit like Menzies did some 50 or more years ago?
Look, I think we need a combination of 3 strategies. I think we need the advocacy of groups like ACL that are doing it in a non-partisan way, seeking to bring influence into politics across the political spectrum. That is absolutely critical. I'm a big believer in that. I gave 10 years of my life to that cause, and I think it's absolutely crucial. I think we do need people in the major parties, and my move to Australian Conservatives shouldn't be seen as me trying to recruit good people away from the Liberal and National parties. I personally know many people who are doing great work in there to, as you say, try and reform those parties, and I think that work should continue. But I also think we've got to the stage where we do need a political movement like the Australian Conservatives on the outside as an alternative to try and keep those Liberal and National parties honest. And I think they have been on terrible mission drift. They've let people inside that perhaps shouldn't have been allowed to be inside, who don't share conservative values. And that's the tension that now exists. And I think we need a political movement that can help bring them back to their true north. In the same way we've seen the Greens play a terrible role, in contrast, by taking Labor to the left, and I think they've even helped bring the Liberal and National parties to the left. We need a counterbalancing force on the centre-right to help bring politics back to the centre. You know, the idea that we would be doing what happened last year with euthanasia and redefining marriage and trashing freedom of speech and freedom of religion would have been unthinkable. And yet both Labor, Liberal and National were all complicit in the consequences that flowed from the marriage debate. There were National and Liberal people in Victoria who voted for euthanasia. So, look, the Conservative side of politics has lost its way, and we do need a better way. And that's why I feel it's important to have thrown my lot in with the Australian Conservatives to see if we can use some leverage there to restore the balance.
Yeah, brilliant. No, well said. I probably would encourage you to maybe expand your strategies just slightly. The threefold approach is very good. The major party, the minor party, and the coordinated activism lobby work of ACL. But I think there's a strong need for a fourth strategy, and that is a strong conservative alternate media.
Yeah, mate, I couldn't agree more. There is no doubt. And look, I really applaud what you're doing. You can use this in your promos, but I think it's...
Well, you'll have to say it without that bit.
I think it's really important what you're doing, Dave, and I know you've got a following, and the more people who can, bypass the mainstream media, the better. I think we're in an age where technology is allowing us to do that, and political movements are defying the mainstream trends, and they don't like it. They didn't like Brexit. They didn't like Trump, and they're doing everything they can to stop people like myself from getting a foothold. So, look, and much of that is thanks to people like you and people sharing interviews like this on social media. It does get the word out. It's really important. We're starting an underground guerrilla movement, and that's exactly what's needed at this time in our nation's history. And I say that in all seriousness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's underground guerrilla. It's about taking the power out of mainstream media, away from Facebook, away from YouTube, away from Twitter, and saying we will be everywhere. We will bypass you, and we will share the truth and the facts and the conversations that we think are important. It's not a claim to exclusive truth. It's not a claim to some unique revelation, and we're not starting a cult. It's about collaboration. It's about allying forces against this axis of evil that has totalitarian, fascist agendas for world domination. And we're going to say no. Liberty will not die. We will be free, and we will be Australian. And so, yeah, come on, preach it.
No, good on you. No, look, I love the last Star Wars movie. Rebellions are built on hope. The rebellion is just beginning, and these are metaphors. And I don't.
Sure.
I'm not suggesting we take up arms or anything like that, but
not yet.
But it is a fight. It's a fight for ideas, and we should be using technology like this to combat bad ideas with good ideas. And if the mainstream media won't give us a platform, well, let's use platforms like yours and others to make sure that the truth does have a voice in this nation, and that people can feel hopeful and emboldened, that there definitely is hope. And I do believe it lies in political movements like Australian Conservatives. It lies in advocacy groups like ACL and others. This is the sort of thing that's rising in our nation, and it doesn't take a lot of people. It just takes good, committed people to start to get involved and to start to not be complacent about our future.
Yep. Now, I guess another thought I'd like to, probe your opinion on is the significance of Get Up on the left is nothing short of a mouthpiece for the Greens and sometime Labor if they tend to go that right. But they're hard left ideologues, and I don't think there's the same kind of grassroots activism on the right. So I love the work that ACL does, but my observation is, intentions aside, it seems to be more of a lobby group, and it's obvious, a bit of a gimme, that's its name, that tries to mobilize a lot of people. Has it got the potential to do everything that Get Up does? Should it, if it could? or is there a need? Is there a gap on the right for an equivalent to Get Up?
Look, I probably should let Martin Iles comment about ACL, but look, from where I see it, from my perspective, having been there for 10 years, I think in many ways it's a Christian Get Up. I mean, it campaigns, it mobilises people, it influences election outcomes, it does all of that sort of work. Now, is there scope for a secular Get Up? A secular version of an ACL that perhaps campaigned on different issues and raised up a group of supporters who were not from the church world. Maybe there's space for that. It would be interesting to see whether something like that would get support. But I think certainly ACL is very strong. It does a lot of that campaigning and advocacy, particularly for the issues that Christians are concerned about, which relate to bioethical issues, freedom of religion issues, social justice issues. So I think it does that really well and will continue to strengthen. But activism doesn't just have to be that sort of activism. Activism can be, handing out how to vote cards at an election. Political parties need a big army of people, of activists who are willing to get out there, wear the T-shirts and the caps, and spruik for us on election day, and advocates in between election times. So, look, political movements are run on activist armies, whether they be through advocate groups or through political parties. There's plenty of scope for grassroots people to get involved.
I think the important message there from what you've said is it's not enough to just vote for your party anymore. You really have to get out and act. Yes. And you can call it an activist or you can call it loving your neighbour. I think it's certainly a bit of both. But if you're voting for somebody because they represent your values, and your values represent your love for 25 million Australian neighbours, then I think it's a very practical outworking of your faith, and it's a very necessary step to help your party get elected, to just share the truth, to help other people see what you see in your party, whatever party that is.
If we don't get active, the likes of Get Up and the Greens, they are active and they are mobilising people. And I think what we've been through in the last 12 months, when we've seen losses like the marriage issue, like the loss of freedom of speech and freedom of religion, like the loss of a pro-life position in Victoria on euthanasia, and don't get me wrong, these people, they're emboldened by the wins they've had. They're going to keep pushing Asia and the other states. They're going to keep pushing the transgender issue in our schools. That is not going to go away. That is only emboldened as a result of what's happened. So unless we become activists, as they have, and meet the challenge, then we deserve to be run over by these ideologies. And we live in a participatory democracy. It is designed for the participation of the citizenry. And for too long, because the culture has largely reflected a Judeo-Christian ethic up until probably when I was a child, but in my lifetime that has changed very rapidly, because the other side have got active, they've participated, we haven't. And it is time to participate. And I really hope that we see a real rising up of people who are concerned, conservatives, Christians, who will rise up and play a role in our nation, because these people can be pushed back. Their ideas are a house of cards. It's like a rotten fence. It just needs a few of us to give it a good shove and it'll fall over, just like the Berlin Wall fell over in 1989. So
that's right.
I think there's a lot of room for hope, but it'll only happen if we participate and get active.
That's a brilliant spot for me to put a plug in for the Church and State Summit. If you want to get off the sidelines and get into the culture war of practically loving your neighbour, then head to churchandstate.com.au. Get the information there about the Church and State Summit 2018. It's coming up in just a couple of weeks, 23rd and 24th of February. There's still time to get your early bird discount rates off the full price. You can also get video-only tickets. We'll be professionally videoing every session of the entire conference, and for half the full price value, you'll be able to get the videos from every session. And of course, if you're coming, you also get the videos at no extra. But we've got fantastic guest speakers, former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson, former leader of the Nationals as well, will be our keynote speaker on Friday night. We've got the new Managing Director of the Australian Christian Lobby, Martin Iles, will be speaking for us, telling us what to do when you or your church faces religious persecution. And we've also got Wendy Francis, Kira Lee Smith, And I think, I've got a guest speaker announcement coming up later this week that you'll need to stay tuned for. There's more coming. So jump onto that website and get all the information about the program and the speakers, and grab your tickets before they run out. I think I'm hoping to see you there, Lyle.
Yeah, I'm planning to be there, Dave, and looking forward to it. And I commend you on an amazing lineup of speakers, and for what you're doing to contribute to a very necessary discussion amongst the Christian community. Thanks.
I'm extremely grateful for the people that have said, they're keen to be a part and excited of just helping. It's a summit that's designed to be very, very practical, very accessible, not for political nerds, perhaps like you and me, but for mums and dads, for teenagers and tradies, from pimples to pastors. There's something practical to help everybody. Look, we're never going to change the minds of some hardcore radical feminists, but there's so many friends and acquaintances that we have at work, at school, and on social media, who are open to a civil discussion where there's just a couple of facts, logic, data, and evidence presented to them, things that they've never considered before. Those are the tools you're going to get. It's arming Christians to influence culture. So I'm really excited about there's people coming from New Zealand and Western Australia and other states. So looking forward to a really big event that's coming very fast.
Excellent, Dave. No, good on you. It starts by getting educated and having our eyes open to what is going on in the culture. So again, I commend you for what you're doing.
Thanks. It's very encouraging coming from you. And I've just always thought we should be doing what we can. And I want us all to be very passionate, like you. Putting aside, investing 10 years of your life into fighting for truth. And the reality is that if you don't know Lyle Shelton, and you think there's a shred of hate or arrogance in his body, please never ever go to a beach, because it's the same kind of care and concern that you'll see in a lifeguard who sits in a tower and tells people he is safe, he is not safe, he is good for you, he is not so good for you, here's how you have a great time, here's how you avoid harm. Those flags, those boundaries, they're not judgmental or condescending or condemning. They're actually the most selfless expressions of love that there is out there. And that's exactly why Christians get involved in politics and in important public discussions. It's not a superiority thing or a discrimination or a hate thing. It's actually just about loving our neighbor. And I always say the most hateful thing would be indifference. So, for all the hate that you have received, Lyle, for all those people who've jumped to conclusions and not bothered to get to know you, but just seen disagreement and interpreted as hate, I thank you and undoubtedly your family very much for the amount of stress and personal cost that you've been prepared to invest in fighting for the future of Australia.
Oh, that's very kind, David. Thank you for that. But as I say, I've been privileged to be part of a great team of people, and obviously lots of people have supported us over the years. But we are in a battle for the truth, and Jesus said the truth will set you free. And
that's right.
We are dominated by a political discourse of lies, and they need to be challenged, and we need to contend for the truth in all areas of life, but particularly in the political discourse. And I know that's what you're trying to do through the summit, and that's obviously what we're trying to do through our work in Australian Conservatives and the other good people around this country.
I love that we're all on the same team, and all just like the Allied forces, all just attacking on different fronts to overthrow totalitarianism and authoritarianism. So let's just to wrap up. Lastly, for those Christians who might be watching, how can we pray for you as you commence this next season of your life, and how would you advise we also pray for Martin Iles in his new role?
Well, that's very, very kind. Obviously, Australian Conservatives is not a Christian organisation per se. It's unashamedly for Judeo-Christian values and sees that as the foundation of our society, which I think is obvious.
Yep, that's historical.
Yeah, but from a personal level, I would certainly appreciate everyone's prayers. I do believe we are in a spiritual battle first and foremost, and just because I've moved from Australian Christian Lobby to a political party, that doesn't lessen the spiritual dynamic of that battle. If anything, it probably enhances it. So I'd be grateful for prayers, and I'm sure I know Martin and the team at ACL would certainly value people's prayers for them. Their role is as important as it ever has been. Australia needs ACL now more than ever, and having someone of Martin's calibre at the top who has a great legal mind, who understands the religious freedom issues so well, that is really going to be the pointy end of persecution for Christians. It's already starting. It's only going to intensify, and I think if people can pray for Martin as he heads up that battle to protect people's freedoms from litigation and the like, I think that would be just tremendous. So,
yeah,
the more prayer, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks very much, Dave.
That's Lyle Shelton, new National Communications Director for the Australian Conservatives, and you will be able to mix and mingle with him at the Church and State Summit in a couple of weeks. If you'd like to subscribe to future updates and episodes and the occasional newsletter that I manage to write, head over to davepellowe.com. You'll also be able to partner with the show there for as little as $3 a month, the more the merrier, but every little amount does help as well. Also, I'd love to hear from you if you've got an idea for a story, if you've got any footage that you've taken of nefarious undergoings of cultural Marxism at work, anything like that, or any story or tips for what we can do. And I also look forward to getting your feedback, criticisms, comments, and encouragement on this episode and the interview, and any contributions you have to what we've talked about, whether it's democracy or the upper house or the place for Christian culture in Australia. It's great to have that conversation and sharpen each other with a robust exchange of ideas. We've got nothing to be afraid of except the truth. Stay true, and we'll see you on the next episode of Pellowe Talk.